Awesome. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. My name is Melissa C. I am a recovered compulsive overeater. I'm going to add my welcome to Deanne's. And yeah, happy to see people here tonight. I want to say, before we jump into step six, it's a often overlooked, I think, step where people don't really maybe spend much time on it, because it's short in the big book, it's real short. And I heard someone say once, why, ask the question, like, why is it so short? Why is it? And and the response was because it's the whole program is really step six. It's everything. Our solution is to have a spiritual awakening, and we call it a personality change, a transformation. So, step six is really a transformative step. It's about willingness to be transformed. And I would say that's the whole program, right? Like, I have to have a willingness to be transformed. Otherwise, I would just be doing another diet, right? And this is not another diet. So, just give you a little background on me for those who might not know me. I I came into recovery in and out and in and out and in and out, never really looking to transform me, anything, just really my weight. I was just very weight focused until I reached a point where I remember, at the worst of it for me, I was over 300 pounds. I knew exactly the foods that I needed to leave alone, and I couldn't do it. Like I couldn't do it. And I was feeling inside that it wasn't just my eating. There was something really wrong with me inside me. There was something really wrong. I was angry, I was sad, I was withdrawing. I walked into every room feeling like cheated and resentful and cursed. I just felt like I was cursed. And I remembered having this awareness that the food wasn't even enjoyable anymore. Like every time I knew that every single time I took a bite of something that I couldn't, it was never going to end with that bite. Like it was going to continue. And even the second I put it in my mouth, it wasn't even enjoyable because the desire for more was immediate. It was like it was in my mouth and I wanted more, or it was in front of me, not even in my mouth yet, but I knew it was coming and I already wanted more than what I had. And so I remembered feeling like, "Oh crap, the food isn't working. Like it's not even working." And even that wasn't enough to get me to stop. Like, that's crazy, right? When you're not even enjoying it, when you're pretty sure it wasn't like, they say like that our problem is like we cannot remember with sufficient force. Oh, I remembered 100%. I knew it wasn't like I was going to eat it and I was somehow thinking it wasn't going to end bad. I knew it was going to end bad. And yet I still couldn't do anything. And I think the thing think I really, my memory failed to hold me in check because I couldn't remember that I really even cared about my own life, about the quality of my own existence. And that was a horrible spot to be in. Right. And yet ripe for transformation. At that spot, I was like, hey, I have to change. Yeah, it sounds like I do. It didn't seem so crazy. It wasn't my weight anymore. It was like, here before you sits a woman who truly needs to change. And then I began taking direction. And 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 every step I took, I sort of felt like this, like it's like if you're ever going down the staircase, your foot is like when you take one step thoroughly, your foot is like positioned ready to take the next step. And that's what it felt like for me. It felt very organic. Each step I did, I was like really ready pretty much to go on and do the next one. And so then we come to step 6, right? And so the good news is when you take the steps with that kind of intensity, with that kind of focus, with that type of position, um, you recover. And that was my experience, you know. And I've been recovered now a number of years, and I've maintained a normal, healthy body weight. I've been pretty much the same size for years now, no matter what's going on in my life. Food is quiet. I know what foods I can't eat, and I don't want to eat them. You know, um, I just don't. It doesn't interest me. Um, so let's talk about step 6, right? We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And, in the big book, page 76 says this: if we can answer to our satisfaction, we then look at step 6. We've emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? Can He now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. So, step 6 is all about willingness. And, you know, willingness is, it's not this sort of like weird thing that just exists out in space. It has some essential components, something that makes it up. And so it's made out of, I think, desperation, like desperate enough, right? It helps us to become willing. Except desperation alone is not enough, because truly just being desperate, well, I would just lay in bed. I'd never do anything, right? I would just keep on going to the food. Desperation is really important part of willingness. And then you got to have a little hope. Like, otherwise, you're not going to be willing. And so, you know, willingness for me, it means taking action. Willingness is not just sitting around saying, okay, I'm willing. It actually means following up with the actions. And I've heard it described like this: there are lots of things that I don't want to do, but I'm willing to do them because I know that they're important, right? And anybody who's had a baby, you know, it's not like I enjoy waking up at 3 in the morning, right? Having to like stumble out of bed and go get a baby. But you're willing to do it when it's your baby crying because it's important and you care, right? And that's sort of how I have to think about my recovery. The things I don't want to do, I do them because they're important, and I've grown to care. And and really for me with step 6, and for most of us, why are we willing to take action? Because everything else has failed, right? And for me, it always came down to being out of options. I never seem, like all those defects they talk about. Well, if I'm still enjoying it, it was pretty hard to let it go, right? When it still felt really good and I was able to manage it, I didn't really want to let it go. It's got to reach a point. And I would say back then, it needed to reach a point of tremendous discomfort and frustration. But I have to say that's not really my experience today, because I'd say part of being recovered is I've been restored to sanity. So I don't need to have my face pummeled into the ground to let go of something. I can I can get a little, ooh, that doesn't feel so good, and I let it go. Wasn't like that at one time. It used to take like a real beating. I mean, that was the only thing I could say. That and I learned that I'm extremely stubborn. I was extremely stubborn. And I have an incredibly high threshold for pain and humiliation. I mean, that's the only way I could think about it, is that as discomfort, as uncomfortable as it was, I must have had a high threshold for that pain because I just kept going back for more. And so I'm willing when I'm desperate, right? And yet, like we said, desperation alone is not enough. We need that essential component, and that part is hope. And it's like, okay, what gives you hope? What gave me hope? Well, for me, it was seeing others who were experiencing successful lives and who once were as much of, a screw up as I was. And I knew it because they told me their stories. And I was like, wow, is that really true? And I think that's why we're told we share our stories. It's not so that we do these great big, look how bad I was stories. Like they're not drunkalogs. It's not like, let me tell you all the awful things I did so that you can, I don't know, that there's some sort of like badge of honor. But it's to give hope that if we can come back from that level to being restored, right? To full and productive lives, we're supposed to share that story. We're supposed to share our stories of transformation. Um, and that, I have to say that all of the steps were actions that other people told me they took that led them to being restored, right? And so it's not just step 6 where I'm going to have to be willing, you know, yeah, willing to have my defects removed. But all the steps I'm going to have willingness. But step 6, it's okay, now I want my defects removed. And it seems like a no-brainer, right? Like, I should be willing to have my defects removed. In fact, it doesn't even sound like it's gonna be like I have to do that much, right? And because the big book, after all, which, I always say I'm a practitioner of this book, it only gives it a paragraph. So, like, okay, so that should be like a no-brainer then. That should be really easy. And and why wouldn't I want them removed if they're causing me to live an unsatisfying life, right? You should want to have things that are causing dissatisfaction to be removed from you. They're keeping me resentful, they're keeping me filled with fear. But I have to tell you that when I looked closely, I'm not so sure that I want the defect removed. I think mostly what I've wanted is the consequences of the defect removed, like the consequences that it gave me. I wanted that removed. And I could say it like this. It's sort of like there was a time when I didn't really want to stop eating compulsively. I just wanted my clothes to fit, right? And that's sort of how I liken it with step 6. So step 6 in the OA 12 and 12, which we don't, I have to say, like many of the meetings that I attend, which are great meetings, they kind of have poo-pooed OA literature. And I don't agree with that. I actually think OA literature has a wonderful place for us in this program. Because first of all, it speaks about food specifically, and that is my problem. I have a problem with food. And I think there's specific things about our disease that might be a little bit different than just alcohol. And in the OA 12 and 12, in step 6, it says this on page 47. We are powerless over each of our defects of character, just as we were powerless over the food. Our character defects need to be removed by a power greater than ourselves. We cannot do it alone. Does this mean we shouldn't try to change our behavior until our higher power changes us? Should we continue being dishonest, intolerant, and all the rest? Of course not. Being entirely ready means that we have firmly turned our backs on the old self destructive behaviors and make every effort to live by the principles embodied in the 12 steps. Trying to practice the new thinking and behaviors to the best of our ability shows our true willingness to change. So, my demonstrating that I'm really willing is that I do everything within my power to practice the spiritual way of life, right? To firmly turn my back on being dishonest. I don't continue to lie and continue to cause, wreckage and say, well, I'm just waiting for God to remove it. It's like, I'm going to have to do some of the work here too. I'm going to have to, I've heard it's like this. I have to cooperate. I have to co create the life I want, right? And step 6 in the AA 12 and 12 says this, page 67, it says self righteous anger can also be very enjoyable. In a perverse way, we can actually take satisfaction from the fact that many people annoy us, for it brings a comfortable feeling of superiority. Gossip, barbed with our anger, a polite form of murder by character assassination, has its satisfactions for us too. Here, we are not trying to help those we criticize, we're trying to proclaim our own righteousness. So, gossip is like a pretty, that's a pretty common defect. Um, and it's really something that we're supposed to really work to put down, to lay aside. It's because when we criticize people through gossip, what we're really doing is saying how great we are. I'll put them down, and it's to puff myself up, right? Um, and my real truth is that I actually discovered that there's a part of me that enjoys my resentment sometimes. That feels really, I feel oddly powerful in my righteous indignation. I feel like that initial, huh, those people, whoever they are, right? And how many times, for me, someone would do something that was so clearly wrong. And then what would I do? I could retell it over and over and over and over again, exactly what they did to me. And in fact, I would get a lot of bang from out of that. I would, even if it was a minor slight, I could talk it up as though they murdered someone. I could really make it into a big deal. And so, and what does that look like? Gossiping and complaining. And for me, I say like this. I think this is like a good analogy for, if you like analogies. I do. I think it's a good way to put something across. So I think for me, gossip is like eating potato chips. Like seemingly harmless. Yeah, after all, it's a potato. Potato's a vegetable, right? I'm gonna put my hand in, I'm gonna take one. I eat one, it's delicious, it's savory, it's whatever. Except I eat the whole bag. And then I feel disgusting and greasy and nasty. And that's what it's like when I gossip. It's like it never stays like just like one harmless little comment. It seems to grow life. The other person adds something in, then I add something in, and it really is you know, it's something I really have had to work hard to cooperate with. But, step 6 means that I'm willing to let go of this pastime as a demonstration of my willingness to have God remove the defect. And the defect, the real defect is resentment. Because I gossip about people or situations I resent. And so if I really want my resentment to go away, I have to stop talking about the people, And so step 6 is like the work of my lifetime. We practice the behaviors of a person who's free of the defect as best we can. And I think about it like this, it's my abstinent behavior plan. You know, God never removed the desire for me to eat chocolate when I went to the store and continued to buy the chocolate. Like, I had to actually make a firm decision that I was not going to the store and I was not going to buy it. And that there was a piece of that, right? I had to get a food plan. God never went food shopping for me. He never bought the vegetables and chopped them up. That was on me, right? That was the action that I had to take. I had to be willing. And I had to go to the store, buy the stuff, I had to prepare it. And then ultimately, God did what God does as I worked the steps. And the desire to eat things that were not on my food plan were removed. And I think it's the same thing with my defects. It's been my experience that I found that my defects don't get removed if I consistently practice them. If I say, well, I don't care, I'm doing it anyway. And so what does it look like? Like, okay, so what's your abstinent behavior plan going to be? Right? Just like I had to write down what I'm going to eat for the day. Would you believe that I have actually had to write down and pre plan what am I going to talk about with my colleague at work who I keep falling into the gossip hole with? I had to like sit down and say, okay, all right, well, her 3 kids are in college right now, so we can talk about that. Like, her right? I can ask her about her husband. I can ask her how her mom is doing. Like, I literally have to say, and then when I'm tempted, just like with the food, right? When I was feeling a temptation, well, I don't go to that party where they're serving something because I've made a decision that I'm going to do everything in my power to remove myself from that situation until the desire is removed. I don't want you to think I don't go to parties. I go everywhere where food is. But when the desire was really strong, no, I didn't put myself in those places. I just didn't, right? I didn't go to restaurants and I didn't walk into, uh, places, in my school cafeteria. They have certain food on certain days of the week, and everybody comes and run, all the teachers run. It's tater tot Tuesday or whatever it is they're all getting. And there was a period of time I could not, no, I could not hang out in the cafeteria. Like, it was too much for me. And so I have to have the same kind of discipline with colleagues that are on the gossip and complaint train at work. And sometimes that means when I hear them talking outside in the hall, and boy, do I want to get in there because I want to. I heard someone else explain to me once that gossip is a way of having cheap intimacy because it was a way that I would connect with the people around me at the expense, of course, of other people, right? And so even today, if my colleagues are out in the hallway and they're talking about something, and I know it's negative, and I know it's part of that complaining, gossiping thing, I have to exercise willpower, maybe suffer being lonely for a minute and not go out in the hallway. And that's where I can actually use willpower. I can actually use my willpower, right? And so what do I do now instead, right? So if someone does something, what I found part of what fed into for me the gossip was another defect I had was I was a people pleaser. I was a peace faker, not really a peacemaker. Meaning I wouldn't tell you to your face if you did something that upset me because that would take like a level of courage I guess I didn't have, right? I didn't want you to not like me, but I would talk about you as soon as you were out of the room. And I can't do that anymore. That's dishonest. So have I have to have honesty with people. It doesn't mean that I have to fight, but it means that if something happens and I believe that I need to speak up, I need to speak up. And then I need to let it go, right? Say what I believe I'm supposed to say and then let it go, right? And, you know, I can make a request that somebody do something, but I can't make a demand, right? And that's part of it too. And, you know, and what do I do when I'm with people who gossip? Like, how do I handle that situation? Well, I try to say something honestly positive about the person being spoken about, you know, where I'd say, oh, yeah, but they're really so good at blank, right? To try to help change it as best I can. Now, by the way, that also means that I have to have courage because people don't always like that. And then I'd be afraid that they're not going to like me or that they're going to think something of me. They're going to think. And, I had a situation at work one time where um, I had a colleague who, by the way, when you stop participating in the complaint train and the gossip wagon, the gossip cart, I say this, that they roll past your station. So I can sometimes hear them talking down the hall and they don't even come to my room anymore. And and that's a blessing, right? That's God doing for me that which I couldn't do for myself. But I had someone a number of years ago who came to my room to tell me something, and she got in my doorway and she started to say it, and she goes, "Forget it." And she looked really mad. She said, "Forget it. You're the most positive person I know." And it was like, and I laughed. I was like, thank you." Like, I mean, but I was exercising willpower. It was not, but over time, God enters our heart and does the miraculous. That, the ideas, attitudes, and ways we once were suddenly cast to one side and a whole new conception. So over time, a lot of that has been removed. Now, I want to be really honest because I had something the other day or last week where something happened at work. I did address the person because it was something that it involved students not getting services, and I felt like it was important for me to verbalize. I don't think it's right, and I said something to the person, and it should have been enough, but it wasn't. And I went to the people. I'm imperfect. I went to the people who I knew I could complain about this with, and I did, and they did. And it didn't take a pummeling into the ground for me. It took a short amount of time. It took, thank God for review, for inventory process, because it's like I looked at my inventory and it didn't, in the moment, it didn't really bother me. It wasn't until I really did my night inventory. And I was like, oh gosh, yeah, that wasn't good. Um, and the next morning, the first thing I did was I went into the colleague that I complained with and gossiped to. And I said to her, you know, um, I don't want to fall into a pattern where the only time I walk into your room is to complain. Like, you know, and that's pretty much what I said. I said, I'm really sorry because I really love you. I really care about you. And I don't want to have that relationship with you. And that was enough, you know? So I find that the more I do that, by the way, the magic of that, the miracle of that was the other situation that I felt so resentful towards. I don't feel resentful about it anymore. It's like God actually removed the resentment when I did the discipline of saying, I'm not going to complain about it. And I made an amend for it. And then I realized the thing that I was actually complaining about, it was okay. It seems like I'm all worried about fair and unfair, but I really wasn't. I was really worried about that it was going to be extra work for me. That's the truth. And um, and I don't live in the world of fair and unfair. I live in love and tolerance. That's my code. And I actually realized that the thing that I was worried about, the kid not getting services, I can provide those services. I know what I'm doing. Like, I'm skilled enough to do it. I'm not, like, patting myself on the back, but I know what the kid needs, and I'll just do it, and it's okay. It's really okay. So, you know, um, there's lots of ways that I have learned in step 6 how to, work on letting go of resentments. It's I have to stay out of the fray of self-righteous indignation and justifiable anger. And political arguments are no longer for me. So I can have an opinion, I can have a perspective, I can even have a voice in those areas, but I can only talk about for myself what I stand for, not what I stand against. And that has been, for me, tremendously helpful. That way I know, like, I can do all things, and I don't argue with people who don't who don't agree with me. It's okay. I wasn't assigned the debater, great convincer. I don't believe that that's the role God assigned me. He gave me a different task. I think I think God hands out assignments, right? And I think the assignment I was handed out is talk to compulsive overeaters. I think that's pretty much it. Teach during the day, talk to compulsive overeaters at night. That's pretty much it. And the rest of the world, they'll figure it out. The rest of the world will have to figure it out. It's not going to be my arena. And so I have to have discipline and balance and structure around that. And if that means I'm ill informed and I don't watch enough news, okay, I'm ill informed and I don't watch enough news. But for today, I'm not killing myself with food. And for today, I'm living what I believe is my purpose. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. So now I have these defects, right? And and amongst them is fear. Fear is like another one. So what do I do when I'm afraid? Well, we have really clear set of directions for fear. One is I ask God to remove it at once. Like, I ask God, take away my fear, direct my attention, show me what you want me to do. And that's the key for me. My prayer is, God, show me what you want me to do. Give me my assignment. Tell me what you want me to do. And I further always say this, God, like, plant your ideas in my head, like, so that I think what you want me to think. And plant your wishes in my heart so that I wish for the things that you want me to wish. And then tell me how to execute that today. And then I don't have to worry about the future because God doesn't give me the long he doesn't give me the long plan. He gives me, like, short. And really that's our formula for fear. We do what we believe God would have us do, and we humbly rely on him. And that's like my go-to. Do today what I think God wants me to do, and I humbly rely on him. And so how do I how do I practice step 6 with my fears? I try as much as possible not to go down the rabbit hole, not to entertain myself with catastrophic thinking. That when my brain goes outside of today, I actually have to execute some willpower. I have to say, it's Monday. It's not Friday. It's like Monday. What are you supposed to do right now? Right now, right now. And the other thing is try to stop gathering evidence that's fear-based. I try to stop, if you start, I mean, listen, if something is bothering you in your body, right? And you Google it once, everything that pops up, it becomes part of an algorithm. everything that pops up the rest of the day seems to be about that thing, right? And I think about it like this: if I show the universe what it is that I want to eat, right? Do I want to eat that fear based thing? They're going to feed it to me all day long, right? They're going to give me a steady diet, and I'm going to just keep feeling the fear of that thing. So for me, one of the things I actually have to do is like, I have to put this thing down when I start looking for things that I'm afraid of, right? Whatever that is. You know, my knees hurt. I could suddenly find a million ailments and then everything that pops up here is about those things. So I have to execute some willpower, put it down and look at puppy pictures. I have to like only look at people's cute pets and kitty cats and you know, okay. And because I'm not a surgeon, right? It doesn't mean I don't take care of my health. Doesn't mean I don't, do what I'm supposed to do, but I'm not in the research business. I'm not a research scientist. It's not the assignment I was given. So I can practice these things, but only God is in the removal business, right? Only God can actually remove it. I can I can ask now. So what do we do for step 7? Well, we humbly ask him to remove our shortcomings, right? With a position of humility. And step 7 emphasizes humility. And this is something that I've often fought against. Like, it seems to go against my very nature, my need for importance and power. And but true humility is understanding my strengths and weaknesses. And in this case, true humility means that I'm looking closely at my defects, the things that are keeping me blocked off from my higher power, because I need those things to be removed so I can get a better connection with power. And I saw in my inventory that my defects are keeping my resentments alive. And that always drove me back to the food. And, some people call them their triggers. And I found that um, I needed these defects removed. And then I found out, wait, I can't actually remove them. I can't actually do the removing, which is why I need humility even more. Right. And in the AA 12 and 12, it says this: Indeed, the attainment of greater humility is the foundation principle of each of the AA 12 steps. For without some degree of humility, no alcoholic or compulsive overeater can stay sober at all. Nearly all AAs have found too that unless they develop much more of this precious quality than they may be required just for sobriety, they still haven't much chance of becoming truly happy. Without it, they cannot live to much useful purpose or in adversity be able to summon the faith that can meet any emergency. So, all right, so step 1 was where I first began to have a real relationship with humility. I saw I couldn't remove the desire to eat compulsively. I knew that I was hopelessly beaten by the food. So then what did I do? Right? I began with abstinence. I did everything in my human power to put the food down. And I got a food plan, right? And I bought a scale and I ate the best of my ability in agreement with my food plan. And I did this with the understanding that I needed God to remove the desire, but that I was going to do the food shopping while waiting for him to remove it, you know? And and in order for the desire to be lifted, I had to practice abstinence. And step 7 is much of the same. In step 6, right, I became willing to have God remove all my defects of character, all the things that were causing me misery and pain, that were bringing me back to the food. I demonstrated this willingness to have my defects removed by practicing the new way of living, One thing, that I was taught to do that I thought, was very effective was I put all my defects, the big ones that were causing me a lot of discomfort, I put them down on paper and I wrote out specifically what it looks like in my life when I am practicing that defect. And then on the other side of the paper, I wrote down what it would look like if I was a woman who didn't have those defects. How would I be behaving if I wasn't like that? And, and like I said, it was my food plan. Like I wasn't a person who normally ate vegetables instead of candy, but I wrote it down and I started eating that. Right. And now guess what? I'm a person who loves vegetables. And my family hides the Halloween candy in oftentimes in the room where I meditate in. Like I became that person, right? And so, um, I would say too that in early abstinence, my stomach was always growling. And I have to say, sometimes when I'm practicing step 6, and I have to say to a colleague, I really regret gossiping with you yesterday. My stomach is doing flip flops. It's like, oh crap. I can't believe I have to say this, especially because there's a lie that my brain will tell me. Maybe it's a lie that she was also gossiping and she's going to perceive that I'm calling her out and saying, "Eh, eh, 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 eh." Sort of the same way that, if I eat abstinently, people around me are going to perceive, that I'm being critical of them and they're eating. Not my business. How she took it, that's between her and God, right? I know what my part is. So yeah, it makes my stomach feel uncomfortable. But, I'm going to practice behaviors that are foreign and feel awkward, and then they're not going to feel so awkward and foreign anymore. And step 7 tells me I can't remove the defect. That's up to God to do it, but I can cooperate. I can certainly cooperate. In the AA 12 and 12 on page 74, it says this: until now, our lives have been largely devoted to running from pain and problems. We fled from them as from a plague. We never wanted to deal with the fact of suffering. Escape via the bottle was always our solution. So, a big part of step 7 for me is understanding that I only increase and prolong my pain when I try to avoid discomfort. Like pain and discomfort is actually a part of having a human experience. And while I don't seek out ways to be, uncomfortable, I don't waste a lot of energy trying to avoid it either. Like oftentimes my discomfort, it's a signal. It's a message telling me that it's time to either let go of an outcome or let go of an expectation. I have learned that I can feel sad, I can feel disappointed, I can be in pain and discomfort, and even the most intensive feelings, they eventually pass and fade so long as I actually feel them, experience them, and then let them pass like a cloud. And this is where I can lean into my higher power and rely on the support available, and when I'm overcome by shame and guilt, for me, that's like one that's like, oh, that hurts, I can recognize the stirrings of my own conscience. That God gave me a conscience and that it's a gentle reminder to stay back on course. Like how I felt about the gossip. It was like, oh, I felt really yucky about it. Okay. Okay. It's not supposed to feel good, right? Clean it up and move on. Page 76 says this: living upon a basis of unsatisfied demands, we were in a state of continual disturbance and frustration. Therefore, no peace was to be had unless we could find a means of reducing these demands. All right, so I prolong my own misery by focusing in on how my demands are not being met and how things are not going my way, right? So, like that work situation, if I keep focusing on this is not right, this is not fair, this is not right, this is not fair, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, my pain is going to increase, you know? And I can make a request, not a demand, and then I can actually have peace. And what I found is if I'm really bothered by things not going my way, I can actually stop having a way. I don't have to have a way about everything. I can see how this works so much better in my relationships. And, it's funny when I was initially doing this talk, I was focused around my kids. My kids were maybe a little bit younger. And I was thinking, like, if I stop feeling so tied into my kids doing things according to my plan, then I can have peace, right? And I would say, I guess right now, because there's this work thing buzzing, it's sort of the same thing. If I stop having a demand for the way that services for students are supposed to be delivered, if I stop having a demand, then I don't feel so pissed off about it. It's like, okay, yeah, all right, technically it's supposed to happen this way, but that's okay. I don't have to have my way about it. And so does it look like I'm a pushover? Like I'm soft, like I'm weak? I think about my union rep would be like, "What the heck? What are you doing?" Well, I'm not the union rep. God didn't assign me that task. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I don't really have to worry if I'm perceived as weak or a pushover because what other people think of me is none of my business, right? It's like the only thing that really I have to put paramount first and foremost is like, what does God think of me? Or what do I think of me in light of do I abide by what I think God wants me to do? And what I found is that my needs and my demands have been insatiable and too great to satisfy. So if I have to err on the other side of not getting my needs and met satisfied, I'm probably due it, right? Probably talk about fair and unfair. It's probably my turn to let go of having my needs and demands met. And letting go and relying on God is what real humility is. So, you know, step 7 is a prayer. It's a request I make of God, and it's not a demand. And like for me, all the prayers that that are most heartfelt for me, like I personalized my prayers so that they are authentic requests. When I ask God to remove my defects, like I name the defect that's currently driving me crazy. And I add, a request for what I would like it to be replaced with. And, you know, um, page 56 says this in the OA 12 and 12. Repeated practice of step 7 enables us to form a working partnership with our higher power. I love that. That's what I'm after. Through which we are relieved of the defects that have blocked our effectiveness in the world. As we gain new humility and even greater freedom from our character defects, God's power flows more surely and freely through us, bringing healing to others as well as ourselves, and drawing to us all the things we once fought so hard to attain: self esteem, a feeling of usefulness, joy, strength to surmount difficulties, fellowship, and love. Our simple prayers, humbly spoken, are answered in wonderful ways as we open our lives to God's transforming power. And we find that once again, God does for us what we could never do for ourselves. And with that, I will